And here we go. Football at 4 with Andrew DiCecco today on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Andrew, welcome back. How are you, sir?
Doing well, Mike. How about yourself?
Well, obviously, Andrew, we've got Eagles Cowboys week. What do you know? 4-5-1 Dallas. These two teams played on opening night. Let's get your take on 12 weeks later. Are these teams similar, different? How do you kind of look at the two teams that played 12 weeks ago?
Yeah, they're different, especially from the Dallas standpoint. They have DeMarvion Overshown, who's back, Savone Ravel, their corner. They added Logan Wilson, of course, Quinnen Williams, Malik Hooker's back. And Donovan Ezaraku's taken on a much larger role this time around, their edge rusher. And so I think they're a lot different from a defensive standpoint than they were back in week one. And the Eagles also are a different team offensively. I think a lot was made about the Lightning at halftime, and maybe that altered the Eagles' offensive plans and functionality in that game. But I think as we've grown to learn, well, that was just a byproduct of what this offense has looked like for the better part of the season.
You know, a lot of people looking at the differences in these two teams. Let's look at the Dallas defense and how different they are. You mentioned Donovan Ezaraku, local kid. They also made the trade for Quinnen Williams. We saw them against the Raiders on Monday night. They dominated that game. Now, yesterday we talked with Q Myers, who covers the Raiders, and he said, look, their offensive line, a mess. You can't really put a lot of stock in it. But how much stock do you put into, the Dallas defense being a problem for this version of the Eagle offense?
Yeah, I still look at they're playing well, the Dallas Cowboys. Dak Prescott's having a good season. I look at the trenches, and I think Dallas, the game within the game to me is going to be the Dallas offensive line, they're healthy now. They have a lot of preeminent players on that line versus this resurgence in terms of the Eagles pass rush. And they've really rattled Jordan Love, they rattled Jared Goff, and they were not comfortable from the early onset of that game. And I think that ultimately played into some of the things that transpired throughout the game. And the Eagles have set the tone there. But this Dallas offensive line could pose some problems, especially if you have, let's say, Fred Johnson at right tackle, but maybe a new center this week, depending on what happens with Cam Jurgens.
Yeah, I want to get your take on, there's a lot of drama surrounding this team. I know you're not in the drama business, so we'll get into some of it coming up here in just a minute. But how much is the drama of the offensive line been a main component of the offensive issues this year? How much weight do you put on the lines, up and down season, some of it injury-related, guys in and out of the lineup, playing hurt? Where do you put that on the pie chart of issues for the problems this offense seemingly is having?
Yeah, it's up there. It's up there. And, you can look at Saquon Barkley, and I know that there may be some that think he's a different player. He's the same guy, at least to my eye. I don't see a different player. And I still think he has acceleration and burst. He runs hard. He's decisive. If there's one criticism that I have, it's sometimes I notice that maybe if something isn't there, he presses and tries to hit the home run instead of taking what's in front of him. But I think the health of the offensive line has contributed greatly from a run blocking standpoint. They're doing really well in pass protection, but you look at Landon Dickerson's been banged up this year. He looks to be a little bit more healthy than he's been. Cam Jurgens had the off-season back surgery. Then he had the knee that he was working through against the Lions, and now he has a concussion that he's working his way back from. And Lane Johnson has been, whether it was the stinger, the foot, the ankle, the Liz Frank right now. So, yeah, I think that's fair to say. And if you can't protect up front, if you're banged up along the offensive line, I should say, it's really tough to play offense. And that's just one of the issues that the Eagles have had on that side of the ball this season. There's been several, but that's one that I rank pretty high.
All right, several is a good word to use. Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4. Let's look at several. The run game is a little different. I want to ask you, Barkley, whether he's the same player or not, I don't know, but is it a discernible, noticeable difference when Bigsby gets a touch?
Well, I also think defenses are playing them a little bit differently when Tank Bigsby's in the game. He seems to have a little bit more room to operate. He does add a spark. He's fresh. He hasn't had the volume of a Barkley. But I just think that Yeah, I think Tank Bigsby is sometimes able to create his own holes. He has an interesting running style, unlike anything that I've really seen, and he creates his own hole, and he has a spark. He's taken some negative runs too this season, but I think he's a good player. I mean, if I'm the Eagles, I'm trying to find a way to incorporate him more. Now, more meaning 6-7 touches a game, because I think that he adds a different dimension out of the backfield. And I also wouldn't be surprised if you see some Shipley as well, just kind of integrating all three running backs who bring something different to the table, kind of like what you saw on that opening drive against Green Bay. I think if you're an offense that's trying to find answers and you're stuck in the mud, this is what you got. So you got to try and find different ways to dress it up with personnel groupings. Maybe you work in a Cam Latu if you're going to go heavy 12 personnel, meaning 2 tight ends, and try to find a way to create some more space in the running game.
Andrew, the pass game. What do we make of this thing? Is there meat on the bone they're missing? Is it just not a good passing game? Why is it so free? Is it the weather? I mean, I've heard people say, hey, look, they played in Green Bay. It was very windy. They played at home, and it was 40-mile-per-hour winds. Did the wind have something to do? Because Green Bay's offense didn't look very good. Detroit's offense didn't look very good. How much stock do we put into that? Or we just look at this offense and say, look, they just do not have a very good pass game at this stage of the season.
Yeah, I look at it, I mean, and there's a lot I have to say about this, because first and foremost, in the Saquon Barkley era, there's been little to no evidence that the Eagles have had this explosive, dynamic passing attack. Now, when you have those kind of weapons and there's that much money invested into the offense, it needs to look considerably better than what it has. I look at the Green Bay game, frigid temperatures. I look at the Detroit Lions game, and I look at the wind, and it impacted both quarterbacks. Jared Goff completed 37.8% of his passes, Jalen Hurts 50%, and then in the Green Bay game, both offenses struggled there as well. So I think there's a common theme. But that's not to absolve this offense this season that has yet to sustainably put together any semblance of a symbiotic passing offense that should be able to almost, I don't want to say roll out of bed, but should be able to put up 24 points, 27 points on a given week. And for whatever reason, they're not doing it. Now I look at self-inflicted wounds. I look at missed opportunities from Jalen Hurts, because there are plays to be made. He's got to pull the trigger sooner. And then I also look at Kevin Patullo and the play calling, which needs to be better sequencing. Doesn't seem to necessarily have a great feel for that at this stage. So there's a lot of things that are contributing to it. But in this game against the Dallas Cowboys, as we move forward here, I mean, this is a game where there's no excuses. You're playing in optimal conditions, indoors, against a Dallas secondary that have proven that they'll give you some opportunities to strike on some big plays if you're able to connect.
Yeah, and this obviously is a Dallas defense that's not great. We certainly saw the Philadelphia defense be great. I want to get into them. I know we talked about the drama a little bit. Last week it was A.J. Brown. This week there's a report, that there's some questions about the quarterback. The quarterback says it is what it is. Obviously, Sirianni says, I don't put credence on it. Should we put credence on this? Is this hey, where there's smoke, there's fire, or is there no evidence that there's friction inside that locker room?
Well, I like to put out my disclaimer and that I don't work for TMZ. I cover football, but it is a story. And what I can say is just I thought that when Jalen Hurts had to answer for it Wednesday at his press conference, he did a really good job of being accountable, as you would expect any leader to do. I think locally, his stoicism and the way that he goes about his business is respected and acknowledged, and that's what you expect from a leader. And it's kind of hard to poke and prod at anything he had to say yesterday. And with regards to those comments, I thought he did a nice job. And then he also likes to shift his focus on the collective about not letting that detract from his weekly preparation. And he really wants to exhaust most of his energy, all of his energy, in the upcoming matchup, which this week is the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, and obviously it's been a distraction for a team that wins a lot. And they win a lot, Andrew, because their defense has been excellent. Now, I'll go back to the thing saying their defense is really, really good. There's not any question there. But we talked about the wind and the weather, and is it that they're that dominant, or did the wind and weather play a factor in their dominance the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question because I certainly think against Detroit, who entered that game averaging 31.4 points per game. Yeah, I think the wind altered or certainly aided them in what they were able to do from a defensive standpoint. But Mike, this defense is the real deal. They have a pass rush now that has been a ripple effect that's aided all three levels of the defense. That's alleviated pressure on the back end. They're sending waves of rushers. Jalen Phillips, Jalix Hunt, who, by the way, probably played his best game as a pro Sunday night against Detroit. And I think the insertion to Kobe Dean was really what's ignited this defense because he sets the tone from a physical standpoint, attacking downhill. His mindset is when in doubt, strike somebody. And the way that he sort of looks at the linebacker position is we run with 4-3 and we bang with 350. So he brings an imposing physical mentality to that position, and he's almost like a coach on the field. And when you have that added to what they already have, and you couple that with Jalen Phillips and the return of Nolan Smith, yeah, this is a defense that not only what they're doing right now, I believe, is absolutely sustainable, but I think they're only going to get better. And I think, Mike, it could rival and be even better than the defense last year that was tremendous.
Well, Andrew, I'll tell you this. December 2nd is the debut of Hard Knocks in-season NFC East. You don't have to be TMZ. Maybe they'll take care of that for us. But until then, it's an Eagles-Cowboys game. I know we got to get out of here. I want to get this last take from you.
Yeah, sure.
Dallas is 4-5-1. This is it for them. If they win this game, they're still alive in a wild card. It's still far-fetched for them. Philadelphia way ahead here. Is this a dangerous spot for Philadelphia? Do you think that this is a game? Philly's the better team. Obviously, everybody sees the records. They beat them once. But is this a dangerous spot with what Dallas needs from this game?
Yeah, Mike, I do see this as a tricky spot. I'm not saying that the Eagles are ripe for an upset or it's a trap game, but this is a game that you can't take lightly because on paper it looks like they have nothing to play for and their season's sort of dead in the water, but I wouldn't be so quick to rule the Cowboys out. The Eagles have had trouble playing historically at AT&T Stadium, and the Dallas Cowboys are a lot healthier than they were in the previous matchup, and they're a different team. So are the Eagles. But, yeah, I think a loss, if the Eagles are to come away with a win, that pretty much, ends the Cowboys season. If not, like you said, they're still alive, and they're a team that when you look at what they have, yeah, they're kind of interesting. But I think this game kind of reminds me a little bit of that Steelers game from last season. I don't know if you're going to see the explosive passing offense like you saw in that game, but I do believe they'll move the ball and sort of conjure shades of what they were at times last season.
Andrew DiCecco, everybody. Make sure you check out all his coverage of the Eagles over at InsideTheBirds.com. He's got a really good piece up on Kobe Dean's return from injury and how he has set the tone on that defense, among other great articles and more coverage from the guys over at Inside.
By the way, I wrote one that came out this morning on Brett Toth and his leadership behind the scenes and how he's impacted some of the younger linemen. So it's a story that you don't often hear about, but I think, it's especially relevant now with Brett potentially starting this week. So if you get a chance, I think you'll really enjoy it.
Yeah, and he's played, pretty well in his 2 starts at center. So check out that piece as well over at InsideTheBirds.com. And, of course, more on Football at 4 right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Andrew, thanks, buddy.
Mike, have a great one.
As always, Andrew DiCecco and the Football at 4 guys here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN.